So I want you to picture a crocodile with something in its mouth. It is it's not letting go. Its jaws are entirely locked shut. Its massive armored body is hissing violently. And as you are watching this happen, warm, wet tears are just rolling down its scaly
Like
cheeks.
real tears, just wet
Yeah.
and sliding right down its face while it eats.
Right. And I need to establish this right here in the first few seconds. This is not a cartoon. This is not some, campfire story somebody made up to scare you.
Hmm.
It is entirely real. It has been filmed, and scientists have absolutely documented it. Crocodiles actually cry while they eat.
It's wild.
It is. So welcome to this deep dive. Today, our mission is to unpack one of the oldest insults in the English language, crocodile tears, and reveal the completely mind-bending reality behind it.
Yeah, and this isn't going to be like some dry biology lecture. Think of it as a massive historical reality check. It's basically the ultimate dinner party gossip. Because for thousands of years, people assumed that crocodile tears, you know, faking sadness or guilt to manipulate someone, was just a completely made-up saying. But the saying is completely true. They really do cry while they're eating.
Which is just, it's so creepy to
It
picture.
really is. But the reason why they do it, well, it's going to permanently change how you use this phrase from now on.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I am just endlessly fascinated by how a rumor survives for millennia without a single person successfully fact-checking it. To
No.
figure out what is actually happening in that reptile's head, we really need to know how this global game of telephone started in the first place.
Yeah, so to understand the biology, we actually have to look at the psychology of the people who started this rumor. We're going way back to ancient Greece and Rome.
Oh, wow. The toga days.
Exactly, the toga days.
Mhm.
And back then, there were already established proverbs comparing two-faced, deceitful people to crocodiles.
Just right out of the gate, crocs are the bad guys.
Oh, yeah. The imagery they used was specifically about a creature who would secretly plot your murder and then have the audacity to show up at your funeral and weep, just to, look good for the audience.
So the concept of performative grief-like, the idea that someone could weaponize their tears to manipulate public opinion, was already this recognized human behavior in the ancient world.
Totally. They just needed a monster to pin it on.
Right. And the crocodile was just sitting right there in the Nile looking incredibly menacing.
Yeah, exactly. So the ancient world laid the groundwork, and then the story evolved into something much darker. Fast forward to the Middle Ages.
Okay.
Religious writers started using the weeping crocodile as the ultimate theological symbol of fake guilt. They used it to describe a person who puts on this incredible performance of being sorry on the outside, but their soul is completely empty on the inside.
Which is terrifying, really. I
Yeah.
mean, you're basically describing a sociopath. And going through the sources for this deep dive, I noticed this didn't stay locked up in academic or theological debates. In the 1300s, this concept went wildly viral across Europe because of this massively popular travel book.
A book.
Yeah. The author claimed that in some far-off exotic land, crocodiles would actually eat a human being and weep profusely the entire time they were chewing.
That book was basically the medieval equivalent of an algorithm feeding you the most sensational, terrifying content possible.
Totally.
The author was gathering up all these exotic legends and just presenting them as geographical facts. Some versions of the rumor evolving around this time said the crocodile cried before the attack using, fake sobbing to lure someone in close like bait.
Wow.
Yeah, and other versions claimed it cried after the attack out of sheer overwhelming guilt. But the basic image of a crocodile with a face full of tears just hooked itself into the human brain.
Right, but there is this hilarious detail about that specific 1300s travel book that I have to point out.
Oh, about the tongue.
Yes. That exact same author also claimed that crocodiles have no tongues.
Which is just so wrong.
It is completely biologically false. They absolutely have tongues. So the guy was just making things up as he went along. I look at this like the worst kind of internet clickbait, but our ancestors didn't have a search engine to verify anything, so they just blindly retweeted it for centuries.
Medieval clickbait is the perfect way to describe it. I mean, it was just too juicy of a story to ignore, so it went completely mainstream.
Even Shakespeare got into it, right?
Oh, Shakespeare was notoriously obsessed with the weeping crocodile image. He used it to depict the ultimate betrayal in Othello. He wove it into Henry VI, and he brought it up again in Antony and Cleopatra.
He just couldn't get enough of it.
He really couldn't. He was leaning on this imagery constantly to communicate to his audience that a character was being fatally deceptive. His contemporary, Edmund Spenser, used that exact same image in one of the major epic poems of the era. He used it to describe a dangerous, sly creature hiding behind soft, tender tears.
It is wild to think about the sheer momentum of this rumor. For 2,000 years, this was accepted as absolute fact. It was written into plays, poems, and proverbs. It became shorthand for human deception.
Yeah, and nobody questioned the core premise until we finally reached the modern scientific testing phase.
Which, looking at the sources, leaves a whole lot to be desired.
Oh, it's so bad. The scientific testing phase is where this story takes a truly bizarre turn. So roughly 100 years ago, a scientist finally decided to put this 2,000-year-old myth to the test.
Okay, here we go.
His rigorous scientific method involved getting his hands on a crocodile and rubbing onion and salt directly into its eyes.
Hold on, let me make sure I have the sequence of this experiment correct. The ancient myth specifically claims that a crocodile cries while it is eating.
Yes.
And this scientist's rigorous test to debunk that myth involved zero food.
Zero food.
He just walked up to a reptile on a Tuesday, rubbed the salad into its cornea, saw no tears, and declared 2,000 years of history officially debunked.
Pretty much. It is genuinely absurd when you look back at it. He assaulted a crocodile's eyes with an onion, wrote up a report based on that complete lack of reaction, and published his data.
That is insane.
And because it was wrapped in the language of science, nobody double-checked his work for decades. That deeply flawed onion test became the official scientific consensus for most of the 20th century. The myth was considered totally busted.
Which is incredibly frustrating. You have this massive gap in the scientific method that just sits there completely unchallenged.
But what's fascinating here is that while the zoology community was confidently closing the book on the reptile, neurologists in the 1920s were discovering something completely bizarre in human patients.
Wait, human patients?
Yeah. They kept encountering individuals who were recovering from a specific type of facial paralysis. And as these patients were regaining function in their faces, they developed an incredibly strange symptom.
Okay.
Every single time they sat down at the dinner table and started to eat, they would uncontrollably begin to cry.
That is so weird. And obviously, this had nothing to do with their emotional state. They weren't suddenly overwhelmed with sorrow over a plate of roast beef.
No, not at all.
It had to be a mechanical misfire.
It was purely mechanical.
Oh.
So the human brain uses a main communication cable, a cranial nerve, to send signals to the face. During the healing process from the paralysis, the nerve fibers regenerating in the face got their wires crossed.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Right. So the brain's signal that was meant to say, hey, we are chewing food, activate the salivary glands to make spit, got accidentally rerouted. That signal traveled straight to the lacrimal glands instead, the pouches that produced hairs.
Wow. It is literally a crossed wire in a biological electrical box. You try to turn on the kitchen sink and the living room lights start flickering.
Exactly. And the doctors studying this condition in the 1920s actually gave it an official medical nickname. They called it crocodile tear syndrome.
No.
Yes. Here you have this entirely real, documented condition happening at real human dinner tables, where people were crying with absolute zero emotional sadness, perfectly mirroring the ancient legend.
This is the part of the deep dive where the timeline just blew my mind. Because that human medical glitch, the crossed wires in our own faces, is the exact breadcrumb that led someone to finally test the animal myth properly.
It really is. A neurologist who actually treated patients with this syndrome realized the ancient legend might not just be a fable.
Right.
He thought it might be pointing at an actual biological reality.
So what did he do?
Well, he teamed up with a zoologist in 2006. They went down to an alligator farm in Florida to finally do the one thing nobody had bothered to do in 2 millennia.
Which is film the reptiles while they were actually eating.
Exactly. Now, the sources note they used alligators and caimans for this experiment.
Not crocodiles.
Well, caimans and alligators are the scalier cousins with the exact same anatomical design in their heads as crocodiles. They had to use them because the actual crocodiles at this facility weren't trained to eat on dry land. And you need the animal out of the water to clearly see what is happening around its eyes.
That makes sense. The setup here is just so dramatic, though. They pointed their cameras right into the faces of 7 of these massive reptiles. Up close, lenses locked on their eyes mid-meal, waiting to see if anything happened.
And the results were completely cinematic.
Did they cry?
Out of the 7 animals they filmed eating, 5 of them cried.
5 out of 7.
Real tears. The footage shows some of their eyes were even bubbling and frothing with moisture while they were chewing their food.
Think about the pure statistics of that for a second.
I know, it's a huge ratio.
If you were sitting at a restaurant, picture 7 people at the table next to you eating lunch. Suddenly, 5 of them just start randomly, violently sobbing mid-bite with tears bubbling out of their eyes. That is an insane hit rate.
It really is.
Yeah.
So the ancient writers, the medieval clickbait travel blogger, Shakespeare, they were all entirely right about the what.
They observed a real phenomenon.
Exactly.
It's-
But they were entirely wrong about the why.
Right, because they thought it was guilt.
Yeah, and knowing that they try is only half of this deep dive.
Yeah.
Now we need to strip away all that romantic, guilty monster narrative and look at the sheer biology of what is happening inside that armored head.
So if it is not guilt, and it is not a lure to trap people, we have to look at the mechanics of how these animals consume their prey.
Right.
When a crocodile or a gator is eating something big, it doesn't chew politely with its mouth closed. It clamps down and it hisses violently. It pushes incredibly forceful breaths out through its nasal passages.
And that hissing is a massive threat display.
Like a warning.
Exactly. It is a warning aimed directly at any other crocodiles in the water nearby. The feeding process can be highly competitive, so that violent hiss is their way of saying, back off, this is my food, do not come any closer.
Okay, let's break down the anatomy of this so we can picture it. The space directly behind a crocodile's nose-like, their sinus cavity, is essentially plumbed directly into the space around their eyes.
Yeah, it is all one big, intimately connected system behind the hard palate of their mouth.
Oh, wow.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, because of that specific plumbing, when all that air gets forced through the head, hard and fast during the violent hissing, it presses right against the lacrimal glands.
Those are the little pouches that produce tears.
Yes, it essentially squeezes those glands like a tube of toothpaste.
Oh man, squeezing a tube of toothpaste is the perfect visual. It connects so directly to how our own bodies work.
It really does.
It is exactly like when you blow your nose way too hard when you have a cold, or when you eat an insanely spicy piece of food and your eyes just start watering instantly.
Yeah.
Your brain didn't take a vote on it. You aren't suddenly grieving your life choices. It is just a bodily panic button. Everything in your head is wired together, and the internal pressure just forces the water out.
It is a pure biological reflex.
Yeah.
It's the exact same basic idea as a doctor tapping your knee with a reflex hammer and your leg kicking out.
Right, you didn't consciously choose to kick.
Exactly. Your body just reacted to the mechanical pressure on the tendon. Crocodiles have that same wiring, that same pressure cooker set up in their skulls. But theirs is turned up to a much, much more dramatic setting because of how violently they force air through their system.
I actually found a detail in the research that I have to throw in here because it highlights just how alien their biology is compared to ours.
Oh, about the salt.
Yes.
Yeah.
Some crocodiles actually use their tears as a literal release valve to dump extra salt out of their bodies.
Which is just wild multitasking.
It really is. They are eating, threatening their neighbors with a hiss, squeezing out tears from the air pressure, and balancing their internal sodium levels all at the exact same time.
Honestly, that complex salt regulation is a deep dive for another day.
Totally. The main takeaway for our mission today is that the weeping is pure mechanical plumbing.
That is the reality behind 2,000 years of legend. It is not grief. It is not a calculated performance. It is not guilt.
It's just air pressure.
It is simply an apex predator hissing so hard to protect its meal that it literally makes its own eyes leak.
But, if the crying is just mechanical pressure from a violent kill, you would naturally expect to only see this happen during those dramatic National Geographic-style hunts on the riverbank.
Right.
But that is the twist that completely flips this entire 2,000-year-old insult on its head.
Yeah, because zookeepers have watched alligators cry over completely boring, already dead chunks of non-fresh fish that were just tossed into their concrete enclosure from a bucket on a random Tuesday.
A bucket on a Tuesday?
Literally. There is no chase. There is no dramatic struggle. There is no violence. Just a reptile casually chewing on a piece of dead fish and its eyes welling up with tears anyway.
So a Tuesday bucketfish gets the exact same emotional response as a massive hunt.
Exactly.
Which really forces you to look at the human side of this entire saga.
It really raises a fascinating question about human psychology. For millennia, we desperately needed the crocodile's tears to mean something.
We really did.
We looked at this terrifying, unfeeling apex predator, and we wanted to believe that the monster had a conscience. We wanted to believe that somewhere in that armored head, it felt just a little bit sorry for eating you.
But it was never thinking about you. It would cry the exact same amount over a pelican or a piece of kibble.
And the ultimate irony here is how perfectly this mirrors our own biology. Think about the insult we started with today. We use the phrase crocodile tears to mock fake human emotions.
Right. We use it to call out somebody who's putting on a performance, pretending to be sad to manipulate the people around them.
But the insult we hurl at each other is based on an animal that is just experiencing a plumbing leak, which exactly mirrors the genuine medical syndrome in humans.
The people with the crossed wires.
Yes, people who have crossed wires in their facial nerves and cry uncontrollably while eating when they just want to finish their dinner in peace. Nobody in this story, not the reptile in the swamp and not the human at the dinner table, was ever crying out of grief.
We built this massive, poetic legend on top of a biological reflex because we couldn't stand the idea that the tears meant nothing at all. Which leaves me thinking about something we haven't touched on yet.
What's that?
If we spent 2,000 years projecting our own complex, deceptive human emotions onto a swamp reptile just to make sense of a plumbing leak, how many other animals are we completely misunderstanding right now?
Oh, that's a really good point.
We look at the natural world and constantly try to see ourselves reflected back, desperately searching for human morality in creatures that are just trying to survive. It makes you wonder if our obsession with crocodile tears was never really about the crocodile at all.
It was about us.
Maybe it was always just a reflection of our own deep-seated paranoia, our constant, lingering fear that the people sitting closest to us at the table are just faking their empathy. So the next time you hear someone use the phrase crocodile tears, I want you to picture this. Somewhere on a riverbank right now, a crocodile is clamped onto a meal. It is hissing, it is crying, quietly, endlessly, meaning absolutely nothing by it. It was never sorry, it's just leaking.